Imagine yourself in your bed. You've just gone to sleep, and you're in your pajamas, you've pulled the covers up, and you're drifting off as you hear the wind rustle against the house. And as you're slowly drifting off to sleep, you hear this loud bang on your front door. And you sit bolt upright. And now you can see the flicker of torches underneath your door. And you go to your door and you open it up, and there are men in your house, armed men, angry men. And they go to your mother and your father's room. Your mother's screaming, and they pull your father out in his pajamas. They take him out of the house, and they put him down on the ground, force him down. They pull his shirt off, and now here come two more men. And they have tar and they have feathers. And they pour this boiling, molten tar on your father's back, and then they spread the feathers down. Your father is writhing in pain and screaming, and you ask yourself, why is this happening? Why is this happening to my family? Why are they doing this to us? What did we do? You might ask yourself and say, that didn't happen in America. There's no way that would happen. And that hasn't happened recently, but it did. It happened in Missouri in 1838.
So hi, I'm Mrs. Clark, and this is Mr. Allen. And for our genocide presentation, we're going to be addressing the Mormon Extermination, also known as the Mormon-Missouri War.
Mormons moved to Missouri, and when they moved there, the Latter-day Saints were given a county called Caldwell County. And it was made special just for them, and the Missourians told them, you can live in Caldwell County. And because there's so many members of the LDS faith, they started to spread out from Caldwell County, and they started settling in a variety of different places. As we get into 1838, on August 6, 1838, there was an election being held in Missouri, and a group of Mormons traveled to this election, and one of the candidates knew that if the members of the church voted, that he probably wouldn't win the election. And so he told his followers to stop them from voting. And because of that, a small skirmish broke out. No one was killed, but several were wounded. And this is what launches what we call the Mormon-Missouri War. After that, in September of 1838, this is the Election Day battle right here. In September of 1838, in DeWitt, Missouri, a group of Mormons had settled there, about 400, and an armed mob of Missourians came and surrounded the city with the intent of starving the Mormons out and making them leave and go to Caldwell County. The members of the church were able to stave this off for about 10 days, and then they decided, well, it's time, we have to leave our homes, and they packed everything up in 70 wagons, and that mob followed them the entire way to Caldwell County, harassing them and making fun of them until they went beyond county lines. The final big event that happened in the early phases of the Missouri-Mormon War was what we call the Battle of Crooked River. And after these early events had happened, the governor of Missouri, Lilburn W. Boggs, authorized a militia to be formed and authorized the commander of that militia to stand guard at the border between Caldwell County and Ray County, Missouri, and told them, do not let the Mormons come out of that county. And eventually, because this commander didn't really like the members of the church, they started to harass them across the border, and a battle broke out called the Battle of Crooked River. During that battle, 3 Mormons are killed and many are wounded, but the commander goes back to Jefferson City and lies to the governor and says that the Mormons came and totally annihilated our forces, they routed our militia, and they totally just messed everything up and killed a bunch of people.
So what's important to recognize about these early phases, as we remember in studying the stages of genocide, is these are those initial stages, even though hundreds of lives haven't been lost yet. We see with classification, as soon as the Mormons move to town, that they are a them. You're either a Missourian or you're a Mormon. You cannot be both. To perpetuate or further that, identifying with the preparation stage, is that they're expected and required to live in Caldwell County. They make this special place for them to stay, but it's not actually special. They just don't want them there, and so they try to isolate them. Furthermore, we see symbolization in the simple fact that they're called Mormons, which was actually a derogatory term at that time. They referred to themselves as Latter-day Saints. But once more, even though it's not a visual cue, it's that sign that these people are lesser and other and undesirable. Finally, we start to see on the election day battle that polarization that either you're with the Mormons or you're with the Missourians, because otherwise the Mormons are going to win. They might actually have someone who cares about them in power, and that's not okay with us. And so you either have to be Missourian or Mormon, no in between. And then lastly, as we start to get to that Battle of Crooked River, we see that organization coming to a head with that militia starting to take things into their own hands to try to drive Mormons out, to discourage the Mormons to be there, and to just lessen the value of Mormon life.
After these events, and because of the lies that were propagated to Governor Boggs signed an executive order, which is known as Executive Order Number 44. One of the notable things said in that order is, and I quote, "The Mormons must be treated as enemies and must be exterminated or driven from the state if necessary for the public peace." After this executive order is signed, another militia is formed, or I'm sorry, not a militia, another mob, an armed mob is formed, and they go to the village of Hans Mill, and we have what we call the Hans Mill Massacre. And this armed mob went into this peaceful village where Mormons were living. They killed, they raped, they looted, they pillaged, and 15 men and boys were killed. Children were driven from their homes, women were raped, and this is the beginning of more of the Mormon extermination rather than the Mormon-Missouri War.
So obviously, with extermination, this Executive Order 44, which was built on lies that were brought to Jefferson City and Governor Boggs, is highlighting that this is a genocide. Even if it's on a smaller scale, people are starting to die. It has now been legalized to murder this people group because they are disliked, because they allegedly are causing problems for the Missourians, even though it's not true. That doesn't matter, because emotionally, all these other stages have built up hatred for the Mormons who are living in Missouri.
After the massacre at Hans Mill, the militia is sent in to surround the city of Far West. Most of the Mormons had then gathered in that capital city where the church leadership was, and the militia laid siege to Far West, and they demanded that the church leaders be surrendered to the government. And eventually the church leaders did, and they were brought before military tribunal on November 1st, 1838, and they were tried for treason, murder, arson, burglary, robbery, larceny, and perjury. None of those crimes could be corroborated. They were never proven, but the church leaders were then imprisoned in Liberty Jail, which is just a few miles away. Eventually, those church leaders were released, and during the ending of this Mormon extermination order, the members of the church leave the state of Missouri. They're being harassed the entire way. It's the middle of winter. They pack up their wagons. Men and women and children are freezing as they try to cross out of the state, and they ultimately end up settling in Nauvoo, Illinois.
That leads us ultimately to the aftermath, because that is allegedly the end of the genocide, but as we know from our stages of genocide, there's always an aspect of denial. So the Mormons leave, they move out, the Missourians are like, thumbs up, buddies, we did it, and that's it. Nothing happened. Or at least nothing happened for 137 years until the Missouri governor of 1976 Governor Bond apologizes and actually recognizes that there was a problem.
So in his apology executive order, there's two notable quotes. First, he says, Governor Boggs's order can contravene the rights of life, liberty, property, and religious freedom as guaranteed by the Constitution of the United States. And then later, he says, expressing on behalf of all Missourians our deep regret for the injustice and undue suffering which was caused by this 1838 order, I hereby rescind Executive Order number 44.
So we do get an apology, but is this a moment of too little too late? People have already died. People have already had to uproot their homes. People have already been tarred and feathered and starved out of their living conditions when all they wanted to do was settle and live there peaceably and live a good life. And so what we have to face with any of these genocides, now that they've been documented, recalled, memorialized in many cases, including for the Mormon Extermination, is that, yes, we remember what happened at the Hans Mill Massacre, but what else can we do besides remember? It's important for us to think about that this is qualifying as a genocide. Hundreds of people probably died during the Mormon Extermination, though it hasn't been thoroughly documented. And we have to remember that life is precious. Life is important. It shouldn't matter whether it's 50 or 50 million, that this is still a tragedy that should be remembered, and we should live with that remembrance in mind. Furthermore, I think we have to consider our dislike for people who are other or different from us, because when you recognize that someone's different from you, sure, we're all different, but when they become an other and this separate group that makes them less than human or less valuable because of who they worship and things like that, that starts to become dangerous. And we might realize or recognize their people again too late, as we see with the apology from Governor Bond. And finally, we started by talking about the fact that we didn't think that this could happen in the United States, and it shouldn't have happened in the United States. But since we know that it has happened here, we need to make sure that we live with the knowledge that we will never let it happen again.
Thank you.